the American Constitutional Republic, affairs of state in Oklahoma, the beliefs, principles, opinion, and views of people like you. This is 3D Politics. Featuring creator of Sooner Politics, an expert on Oklahoma state government, professional advocate for those needing mental health care. Find him at SoonerPolitics.org, David Van. And of course, founder and scholar of Constitutional Grounds, political leader, educational speaker, former state of Oklahoma elector. Find him at constitutionalgrounds.com, David Oldham. And of course, me, your fine host, the verbal Viking, perspicuous plunderer of conversation, Tommy McKay, your fine host, right here once again, 3D Politics Live, every Monday night for a couple of years now. Exciting show tonight. Jackson Lahmeyer, who is the contender against Senator Lankford. He is on the show tonight for the first half hour. I can't wait to bring him on. What a coup. We finally got somebody to contend with one of the young swamp monsters out there. We've had Inhofe for 50 years, and now old Lankford is working on his time schedule. But tonight, Jackson Lahmeyer, challenger to James Lankford. Also, we're going to talk a little bit about the Prince Harry, of course, and Meghan Markle. We've got to get some of that in. Vaccination rules are all about our COVID update. And, of course, a constitutional minute and an update from Oldham. And we've got it all going on tonight. So let's humanize ourselves first. What do we know? What have you guys been doing? And what do we know about your regular life? Are you still guys human?
What, can you see my face?
Yeah, but that could be a deep fake. That could be a deep fake, David.
I'm looking forward to tonight's show, and then later we're going to talk about getting permission to go out in public without a mask. Who knew we needed permission?
Yeah, well, they did. They knew a long time ago.
Yeah,
I've got some for me, it's exciting news. We won't, I'm sure I'll share more later. But I do have to. I got to show you this. I am now online as the verbal Viking. There it all is, baby. Right. You can see I've got the verbal Viking blog. Van taught me how to blog. I've got my GymWorks information that shows you, photos and videos. I've got my OPG videos are always there. Right. Always Bruce Jenner to me. That's a winner. Yes. Audio there on SoundCloud. And of course, I cue them over here at 3D Politics to be able to find us right there. Awesome. So you can catch me. You know where to find Van. He's over there at SoonerPolitics.org. You know where to find Oldham, ConstitutionalGrounds.com. And now you know where to find the old Tommy over there at theverbalviking.com. Oh, so there you go. So, okay, I think we need to go ahead and set this up and bring Lahmeyer in here. Now, the last couple of shows, I was certainly upset with Lankford, and I just went off the edge with demure and skirts and stuff like that. And Monday I get all fired up, and then on Tuesday I shake in my boots thinking, boy, I can't wait till the senator calls me. Yes, Mr. Lankford.
Have you heard from him yet?
No, they don't answer me. Are you kidding me? If you're an incumbent, you don't dare talk to me because I'm likely to ask you something.
I talked to a couple people from his office on Saturday. It was interesting, yeah.
Oh, well, very good. Maybe we can bring that in. But let's go ahead and move to the challenger. I'm so glad to see one. The challenger to James Lankford, Jackson Lahmeyer. We're going to bring him in from the waiting room. Ladies and gentlemen, let me see if we can find him here. Let's see here. Oh, there it is. We're going to bring him in. And here we go. Oh, perfect. We beamed you in. Look at that. Now that's 100%. Look at there. What happened to David Van?
He was trying to not get off anything, and now everything crashed.
I don't know why. I took the cube out. Jackson Lahmeyer, how are you today?
I'm doing absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much for having me on tonight. I think we'll have a great time.
Oh, you bet. I appreciate your opportunity for us to speak with you. Have you met? I don't know. I know you and I are meeting for the first time on Zoom tonight. We certainly appreciate your time and your service as a challenger to Inhofe. Anybody who does this official campaigning is doing service to the country, I believe. But do you know Van and Oldham? Have you met before? Or is this the first time for you guys?
It's the first time.
All
But
right.
by the way, I'm not challenging Inhofe. It's actually James Lankford.
Oh, well, I'm sorry. Thanks you for correcting me. I put them all in the same bucket when they get in the swamp. So hopefully we can keep that from happening to you. But yes, that's correct. Lankford was the one I was all upset about because he put his foot down and then took his foot back. And so that was a problem for me. But enough of me. Tell us why you got into politics, why you're running, and your three major points of what you're doing.
Absolutely. Well, for those who may not know, I'm the pastor of Sheridan Church right here in Tulsa. And I own my own business, Lahmeyer Investment Company. I got 5 wonderful, beautiful kids with my wife, Kendra. So we have, a great family, great life, great church. Back in 2018, I was eyeing maybe running for state senate in District 34 of Oklahoma, which is where I live in Owasso, and just kind of working behind the scenes, looking at what would that look like to run for the state senate. Then 2020 hit, and everything changed. And our church came under attack from our incompetent mayor, our radical city council, and the weaponized health department because we refused to shut down. And we also refused to enforce the mask. Now, we're not anti-maskers. We have masks available, but the majority of the people in our church didn't want to wear them while they were at church, so we didn't enforce it. And I found myself as a pastor in a fight with our local government. Thankfully, I got a strong church, a lot of fighters like me, and we won. We won against the mayor, we won against the city council, and we also won against the health department. All 3 of those different battles, we stayed open, we did church, and we didn't enforce the mask, and we got stronger through that entire process. But while that was happening, it was about in October that I just started sensing that, the Lord was leading me to run for the United States Senate. Now, I wasn't eyeing the U.S. Senate. I was looking at the state senate here in Oklahoma, and I wasn't sure how to begin to tell people that I'm thinking about running for the United States Senate and challenging James Lankford without them thinking I was absolutely crazy. I'm a pastor, I'm a business owner. I've never been into politics, and I'd be honest with you, that's not necessarily the goal. But I realized how important to have strong leadership in those positions because I experienced very poor leadership on the end of the city of Tulsa. And I started to watch some things when it came to James Lankford that I was very unimpressed with. Back in June, whenever it was the summer of rioting and there was just so much tension within our nation, James Lankford, he didn't come out and say, I support the bill to replace Columbus Day with Juneteenth as a federal holiday. He actually wrote the bill, and that concerned me. Why is a senator for the state of Oklahoma jumping on board with this cancel culture theme that is taking place? Now, obviously, as soon as Senator Lankford realized that there was going to be some major backlash to that, he pulled back very quickly. But we have to remember, he wrote that bill then. And then I watched him after the election. That was so crazy, flip and flop like a fish out of water. It was, 1 minute his foot was down and he was going to make a stand. Then the next minute, he's caving. And so it was just something that didn't sit well with me. And when he came back to Tulsa and apologized to the Black community for questioning fraud in those cities like Philadelphia and Atlanta, because they're highly African American, and he apologized for questioning those races having fraud within them. I said to myself, something's not right with this. Why is he apologizing for questioning which all of us recognize there was fraud in this past election in cities like Atlanta and Philadelphia, and it's not racist to question what happened. And when he apologized, I said, this isn't good. This isn't good. We've got a very, very weak individual. He's a good guy, mind you. James Lankford is a good guy. but he's a very weak leader. And right now, our country doesn't have time for good, weak leaders. We need good people who are strong fighters. And that's just sort of been the trend that I've had in 2020. So to answer your question, why are we running? Well, I believe the Lord guided me to run. I didn't know what that would look like. And I had to take the advice that I'd give anybody in my congregation. If God's telling you to do something and God is confirming it with other people in your life, you better do what God's telling you to do. So it's easier to preach that than it is to practice that. And so we're doing it, and we're having tremendous success right now. Absolutely tremendous success.
That's excellent. Yeah, you know, you had a couple of lines in there that I wish I'd have written, but that was just really some of my favorite stuff there. And I got your name right. I might get the other guys' names wrong, but I got your name right. Hey, before we move on to a couple of questions, because I got one already, and I want to talk about the three main points you want to do when you get into office, hopefully. But Tuesday, what's coming up for you? A big thing on Tuesday.
We have the biggest event so far in the short life of this journey. We've been in the exploratory phase of what would it look like to run for the United States Senate, and not just challenge James Lankford. We're going to replace James Lankford. What would that look like? And well, we had a big break. General Michael Flynn has endorsed me for the United States Senate, and we are flying him into Tulsa March the 16th, which is a Tuesday, and we're going to have a huge event out at the Riverwalk. General Flynn's going to share. I'm going to share. It's going to be at 6:30. In fact, you're the first media outlet that we're telling. We got a press release going out tonight. So this is breaking news live.
There you go, Van. There you go. Who's breaking news now, Van?
Breaking
there it
news,
is.
Breaking news. So it's going to be at the James Riverwalk at the Drive Time headquarters. It's going to be at 6:30. General Flynn will be there. I'll be there. And we got some others lined up as well. So it's going to be a great time. It's a big honor.
Okay. Now I was exploding with joy there. Tell us again where it's at and what the times are again.
It's going to be at the Jinx Riverwalk, and it's the Thrive Time headquarters. And you can just Google that. You'll find where that is with Clay Clark. And it's going to be at 6:30 Tuesday night, March the 16th. And General Flynn will be sharing, and I'll be sharing, and we're going to officially launch the campaign. We're going to move out of the exploratory phase and into an actual candidate.
Okay, that's excellent stuff. I'm glad you're getting some support back there. So as we move into some questions, we're can you concisely say, you know, three main points or motives you have if you get in? What's the three main things you want to get your handles on?
When it comes to the principles, I think that's what's super important. You got to be grounded in your principles. And in 2020, I led the church with three principles that seemed to work very well, that people respected and they liked. The first one was, it's got to be biblical. And what I mean by that is when G.T. Bynum and our radical city council said, you're not going to gather and have church, well, that's not biblical. Hebrews chapter 10, verse 25 says, don't forsake the assembling together of yourselves. So we don't stop that. Not only does it need to be biblical, it's got to be constitutional. Although our mayor, although our city council was saying we couldn't gather, the First Amendment of the United States Constitution guarantees the right for me and my church to assemble together. And then thirdly, it's just got to make common sense. If we used common sense, we could solve so many of the problems that we have in front of us today. Wearing two masks in your car all by yourself, that's not common sense. And so we've got to stop living on our heads and start living on our feet and thinking.
That's right. Two masks in the car by yourself is comedy. That is not common sense. Hey, you're listening right now to Jackson Lahmeyer challenging James Lankford for the seat in the Oklahoma Senate. And so we're finding out why he's running, and that's some exciting stuff. I'm really glad you're here, but also you're joining David Oldham and David Van along with Tommy McKay every Monday night on 3D Politics Live right here on Facebook. Now, Jackson, are you ready for some questions?
Absolutely.
Okay, Oldham, what do you got?
Well, thank you, first off, for running, because we need more candidates to run for difficult seats. And going up against an incumbent is definitely an uphill battle.
Sure.
So my concern is the U.S. Constitution. The concern I have are many, but it's one that I asked Senator Lankford back in when he was first running. This would be what, 12 years? How long has he been in? Anyway,
he had a special election in 14.
Yeah, it was before the special, and and I asked him what his position on the drug war was, and then I asked him what his justification for his position.
What is your question for the?
I'd like to ask you the same thing. What is your position on the war on drugs? Have you?
What do you mean? What do you mean by the war on drugs specifically?
Well, the prohibition and then the use of government force to go out and go after the supposed criminals because they're operating despite the prohibition.
I think what my colleague is asking is your general concept of, vice versus crime where drugs are concerned and federal authority versus state authority in that area.
So if we're speaking in terms of something that we would consider more of a minor drug like marijuana, I think that's different than, say, something that's a much greater destroyer, such as meth or cocaine. And so I think we look at it from those two angles. In the sense of here in Oklahoma, we have legalized medicinal marijuana. It's more like the bill is more written like recreational marijuana. So I'm not opposed to medicinal marijuana. I have seen, though, as a pastor, we run a great Celebrate Recovery group here at my church. I have seen the impact that drugs have upon so many different families, destroyed so many different lives. And so it is a balancing act between personal freedom and responsibility, but also punishing crime. And we understand there's a lot of other crimes attached to some of those larger, more nefarious, well-known drugs. So it's a balancing act. Should somebody be locked away for the rest of their life because they sold marijuana 3 times? Absolutely not. I would completely disagree with that. But I think we have to recognize that there is a serious issue here in the United States of drugs pouring in and destroying so many families. And like I said, I've seen that firsthand, and it's something that I think we have to address. But we have to educate people. We have to help people. I don't think help is just throwing them in prison. I don't think that's the answer. I think we've got to be able to help them along the journey to recover and recuperate. And that's one of the things we do here at my church is we have Celebrate Recovery designed just for that very purpose.
All right, Van, what do you got?
Yeah, Reverend, following up on that, you're running for federal office. Do you think constitutionally our federal government has a constitutional role in prohibiting drugs within a state, such as, what you call the recreational drugs?
So I am of the opinion that we have a false impression of how government is supposed to work. We think the federal government is king and queen, and then the state governments are kind of just, they're below that. I think we have to empower our state governments. Here's what I find is interesting. A lot of people will say, well, we can't do anything about the issue of abortion because, the Supreme Court has said Roe v. Wade. So as a state, we're bound to that Roe v. Wade issue by the federal government. But when it comes to what we just mentioned, the issue of medicinal marijuana, the state of Oklahoma said, I don't care what the federal government has to say, because we all know federally it's against the law. But what did the state of Oklahoma do? It exercised its authority constitutionally to implement. If we want to regulate and have medicinal marijuana, we're going to do it. So the states have a lot more power and authority than I think most people realize. And we've got to empower the states to govern themselves.
Then wouldn't you also say the federal government should just back out of all their other prohibitions having to do with it and leave it up to states on things such as meth or cocaine, as you mentioned?
I think for the most part, each state should govern itself. Now, in regards to what the federal government is doing with the war on drugs, that's something where advice will come in. There'll be advisors coming to tell me. I don't know specifically what that looks like. That's not an issue that I'm thoroughly aware of, but I can tell you it should be the state's responsibility to govern the state. That's where I stand. We need less big federal government and we need stronger state government.
Okay, so I got a question kind of back to the crime versus
Vice.
Thank you. Vice versus crime. So you support the idea, I think here in Oklahoma, especially in Norman, we've got a drug court. It's a special, they've specialized a whole new court where it's like traffic court. They're not dealing with it like it's a crime because traffic violations are just that. They're violations. They're not crimes necessarily. They could, I mean, so the point is, if you're not harming someone else, it's a vice. So you agree with that concept of the drug court thing?
I think that rehabilitation has to be the goal. Drugs are a destroyer. I've witnessed it firsthand. Rehabilitation has to be the goal in mind. And so we have to get better at doing that. What we really have is a mental health crisis. That's what we really have on our hands. That's why it's so difficult to be in law enforcement. It's just the battles that they're facing is absolutely incredible. And so we've got to work, and we have to do something in the sense of letting local nonprofits flourish. That's a huge responsibility of local nonprofits, not so much the government. The local nonprofits should be at the forefront of this fight of rehabilitation.
Jackson,
I'm
not laughing at you. It's just Tom has some history about how he
nonprofit. Look, I'm not going to get into it, but put this in your, wheelhouse and think about it. Nonprofit organizations came about when America was suffering not a deficit, but we were loaded with cash. We had money to spend. We were talking about spending excess income that we had beyond our means. Well, now we're in debt to the hilt. We really can't afford
30 trillion.
We can't afford to let any entity not produce profit for the country. We all hands on deck producing profit. So I've got it's death by 1,000 cuts nonprofits is my concept. So I disagree with you on nonprofits.
It'll take more than 15 minutes to go through that.
And people are like, oh yeah, what about the church? Yes, and not the church. No breaks for anybody till we're out of the deficit here. That's my concept. But I'm not running for Senate, and although I've done drugs all night long, I don't want to talk about drugs all night long. We're gonna have to move on from the drug stuff. What else you got? Okay, Olden, what do you got?
Can I follow up, because you were talking about you want to re-empower the states and push things back to the states. Now, the states often want the feds to take the heat rather than them having to deal with it. But right now we have HR 1. I don't know if you're familiar with that. That's where they're trying to federalize the election system without changing the Constitution, which says that the state legislatures are the ones that set the rules. Instead, they're going to set the rules from the federal government. And I'm wondering where you stand on HR 1, whether you will stand with the filibuster or whether you would go ahead and end the filibuster and let it go to a vote. What would your position be on that?
I think we need the filibuster. And when it comes to our election system, I think all of us on here and probably everybody watching, we need a complete overhaul of the U.S. election system, especially from what we just, witnessed. There is so much fraud, there's so much questioning, and there's just such a debate over something as simple as a voter ID. And that doesn't make any sense to me, why that is so controversial. We use IDs for everything. It's incredible how often we use ID, except when we're voting on some very important issues that are going to impact and affect every single one of us. And so we need a complete overhaul. Now, what that entirely looks like and every single little detail to that, that's going to take time to figure out. That's going to take time to actually get to the bottom of what happened in 2020. I don't think any of us fully know or fully understand. I think we have an idea. I think some of us have guesses that are better than others, but I'll bet you all of us are in agreement that we've got to address the mess of this voter irregularities that is taking place. They call it irregularities. James Lankford may not call it fraud. Jackson Lahmeyer says there was fraud in 2020. We got to address it.
More important than that, Michael Lindell's got a whole show that'll tell you what happened.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
And again, I can understand even an opponent disagreeing with me, putting their foot down and saying, here's what I stand for. But when you demur and take off and can't even hold your point. One of the things I also noticed about Inhofe and Lankford, and I also noticed it about Chris Christie. There's a characteristic of a rhino to where when there's no way to win, it's fourth quarter and we're 27 points down and they've got the ball. They're like, yeah, our team, our team, our team. But when we're almost maybe going to win the presidency, they're like, oh, I don't know. I think I heard a bump in the hall. And then it's like, man, because my problem here, sir, is that no matter what James Lankford says in the future, to me, honey, I'll never beat you again, even though I just did last weekend. How can we trust him? He said he was going to do something. He backed off. I mean, it's like we cannot. There's zero words he can say. The probability of mathematics is, yes, sir.
What you're saying is what I'm hearing all across the state of Oklahoma. Everywhere I go, whether it's to a home and there's 10 people there that I'm meeting with, or we're at an event. The other night, there's 500 people and they're coming up and talking to me. Everyone is saying the same thing. I helped get that guy into office, and I'm going to do everything I can to get him out of office because he has completely turned his back on everything we stand for and represent, and everything he said that he stood for and represented. And I can tell you, we're working very hard in building some great partnerships, obviously starting out with General Mike Flynn. The whole reason that General Flynn reached out to me, I'm the very first candidate for their super PAC. Their super PAC is not designed to go after Democrats. It's to go after Republicans who betrayed the United States of America and betrayed the oath of office.
Right. Excellent. Oldham, what do you got for us?
Well, I'm listening to all this. I think it's fabulous. My next question would be, $1.9 trillion. What say you?
It's unsustainable.
What should we have done? And there's another 4 trillion before that, all in 1 year. Where would you have come down? Would you have held the line and not done anything? What are you going to be? What are your positions on one, spending, two, on omnibus packages? Because we've heard a lot of things from different people, and we're seeing people again not keeping their word.
That's enough. Chew on that, sir.
You know, when it comes to the printing of just excess money, what I saw today is the U.S. was 28.1 trillion in debt. The 1.9 puts us at exactly 30, which to me is just mind-boggling. It's mind-boggling what we're doing, not necessarily to us, which we are, but to our children and our grandchildren. Yeah. The nightmare that they're going to receive, that we're going to pass down to them, is incredibly selfish. What we've done, I'll just use the last, 1.9. There's so much waste and fraud and abuse and payoffs and all that within this package that got rammed through. You have to just say, time out. What is going on here? We've got to think about this. And you may remember from years ago, Congressman Jim Bridenstine, whenever he argued against a lot of the funding that was going for a hurricane relief disaster package. They had already maxed out FEMA, and they were just going to print more money. And his question was, what are we going to cut in order to accommodate this over here? And I think that's how we have to look at it. It's just like our own personal budgets. If we have an emergency come up in life and we have to spend, on the emergency, what we have to do is we have to cut other areas that might be needs or wants or desires, but you have to be able to at some point live a balanced life. And the United States is out of whack right now. Now, is one senator going to go up and solve all of our problems? I dare not promise that, but you can use the bully pulpit You can use the influence, and you do get 1 out of 100 votes. That's very important. And that is to just use, and this is where it comes to biblical, constitutional, but common sense. Common sense says printing all this money is not wise.
Jackson, Lahmeyer, we've got a hard break. If you can, I'd love to have you stick around because I feel like you've got more to say, and I know I've got more to say. Well, thank God. Let's hope you're up there representing us better than the last crew as we have our hard break and we reset at the half hour once again. Goes just like this, kiddies. Oh, yeah, the American Constitutional Republic, affairs of state in Oklahoma, the beliefs, principles, opinions, and views of people just like you and me. Jackson Lahmeyer, David Van, and David Oldham. Here we are again with 3D Politics every Monday night. I'm your fine host, Tommy McKay, right here, your verbal Viking, along with David Oldham, constitutionalgrounds.com, and of course, David Van from SoonerPolitics.org. Tonight's special guest, Jackson Lahmeyer, just lighting up the phones, by golly. I tell you, lighting up the phones. Well, I kind of rushed that intro a little bit. What I will say, I do want to get your comments as we head out of that. Tell me about term limits. I will say, I have moved. I very rarely change my position, but I got to say, years ago I said elections are term limits. There's no reason to let some automated force do what are in the hands of the electorate. But with this last election, if we've got the Dominion machines and anything else I can talk about, I mean, if they're going to do that, there's the voting. That doesn't mean anything. What say you, sir?
So that's what I have found interesting in this experience of just going around and listening to Oklahomans, no matter what the group is. It could be a group of pastors, group of businessmen. It could just be, average people gathering at a home. Everywhere I go, term limits, term limits, term limits. And I happen to agree with it. And here's why. Nobody should spend a lifetime in Washington, D.C. It's unbelievable. Having a real job in your life every once in a while is not a bad thing. It's okay to go serve your country.
Tell my wife. Oh.
and have a real job. So term limits, I think they're important. And I know I'm not running against him. And he has nothing to do with this race in particular, but Jim Inhofe. I just can't get on board with the continual reelection, and so much power. What happens is whenever you raise that much money and it's continually happening, you scare off anyone else from running against you. So you can have complete control. It's a monopoly. And we have just seen with him that now I don't even know where Inhofe stands. He used to be the champion for Oklahoma. Everyone loves him reelecting. And I was at the Tulsa County Convention a couple weekends ago, and Jim Inhofe sent a representative to get up and speak. There was 500 Republicans there. I'm going to say 400 of them tried booing the guy off stage representing Inhofe. And so term limits, it's something that I think we desperately, just by the way, James Lankford didn't even send a representative. So right. That tells you probably what they thought was coming.
Well, he was going to come, but he changed his mind. Van, what do you got?
Yeah, I was at the Cleveland County Convention. As people know, I'm running for state vice chair. And Lankford's representatives were there. And out in the hall afterwards, my good friend, former congressional candidate, James Taylor, was confronted by Lankford's team saying, how dare you use such language from up there at the podium? And he was the vice chair of the county. This was his outgoing say. And he said, it's time for Lankford to get his butt back into Oklahoma and listen to what they're saying. And she scolds, she says, we don't use that language at our office, trying to shame this man who's pastor of a church in Norman. I've been to his church, and pastor, it's okay to sometimes get a little bit crude to get your point across, right?
Sure.
A little bit.
I'm a fighter. All right. I'm a fighter. So that's just my nature. I'll tell you, I'm really, really looking forward to getting on the debate stage with James Lankford. Mm-hmm. It's going to be one fun time.
Yeah. I mean, you can't hardly exercise a demon without hearing some language, I mean, as a Catholic.
Well, And, you know, as somebody who studied Oklahoma history, Juneteenth meant nothing in Oklahoma. It was another 2 years after emancipation, after the Civil War in 1867, that the final tribe, the Osage, signed a compact to release their slaves. And that was at around January 19th. I think we already have a civil rights holiday on that date. So I told Lankford's team, I said, skip the Juneteenth stuff. That might mean something in South Texas, but it doesn't mean anything here to the slaves of the tribes who were still in bondage for another 2 years after the Civil War.
Yeah, with the Juneteenth and the cancel culture stuff, I don't know what the connection is. You know, he wrote that bill out, and I think it was June, or it may have been July. It was sometime in the summer, and which was just shocking. Like, why is he didn't come out in the media and say, hey, you know, I think it's a good idea. I support the idea. He wrote the bill, which just he wrote the bill, and then to see him come and apologize to the Black community so he can stay on the 1921, you know, Race Massacre Commission. I don't know what is there, but something's there. This cancel
I think
culture, I don't know what it is.
Here's what I wonder what it is, and that is like, okay, there is the Race Massacre Commission, and they are skin toned Black, and then you've got Lankford, and he's very pale and redheaded. So I'm not sure who's using who for skin color here, because they might say, hey, I got a redheaded white friend. Yeah, that might be.
I will say
that's a joke, Lahmeyer.
It's interesting. You all can do some research into that.
Yeah, Pastor, I will say Lankford's had a bad stretch of, you know, he'll say things and it will really get taken a certain way, and he's got to back things down. He's had to do it a number of times.
The wind here in Oklahoma whips around. He keeps putting his finger up at him to change his mind.
But I'm saying that to say that's part of it. And when I was talking to Lankford's office, I told him that. I said, but some of these things you can't excuse by saying, well, I was taken out of context. You just can't. Sure. Like flip-flopping on the January 6th certification. You can't call that.
You know what I didn't appreciate was whenever there was a lot of media uproar about President Trump not giving enough intel to the Biden administration, and James Lankford came out like, oh, I'm going to make sure, I'm going to put my foot down and force.
Oh, I do
remember that. I didn't appreciate that. As an Oklahoman, I didn't like it.
I remember that. Yep.
So one of the problems I also have, besides other things, is the 17th Amendment. I think we need to repeal the 17th Amendment because it allows you senator guys to run for popular vote and instead of being held accountable to a legislature. How do you feel about that one?
You know, to be honest with you, I don't have an opinion on that. Here's something you're going to get with me: honesty. I'll shoot it straight with you. I don't have an opinion on that.
Okay.
But I'll tell you, I'll get some people around me and they'll help inform me and I'll formulate an opinion.
Well, that's good. I know that. I mean, one of my opinions about Trump was that he made constitutionalism popular, because I never claimed that he was a conservative or even a Republican, but he's a populist. And he made conservatism and constitutionalism popular. And so if populism gets you elected, that might be a good thing.
If I could, Pastor, if I could,
Sure.
I'm going to just give you just a bit of advice. Hang on to that humility and that honesty you just gave us. You know, one of my favorite Oklahomans, a Democrat, Will Rogers, who said everybody's ignorant, only on different subjects. And it's important that our politicians not try to blow smoke when they don't know. Just say you don't know.
You'll never get that from me.
Yeah, that's important.
You'll never get that. And I'll tell you what I'm doing, because I'll be honest with you, I'm a pastor. And I'm a business owner. I don't deal in a lot of these other areas. I'm putting together a 10-headed coalition of leaders and advisors in different spheres of influence, such as healthcare. Because, you know, people ask, how do we fix healthcare? I honestly don't know. I've got an opinion. I know it's really bad, but we've got professionals who are going to help me, who are like-minded professionals. We're on the same page. We've got, you know, small business infrastructure, faith leaders, and you name it. And these are going to be advisors to me along this process, helping inform me, create policy, because I'll be honest, there's a lot of things that I don't know all the little details about, and I'm not going to be one who's just going to lie and BS my way through some question. I teach at a college here in Tulsa, Bible College, and if somebody asks a question, I give them I say there's the political answer, I can give you a BS answer, or I can give you an honest answer, and sometimes the honest answer is I don't know.
Yeah, that's
Tom.
it. I was going to
Could
say that. Yes, Oldham, you've
Oh,
been
I mean, I love the idea of you're going to surround yourself with knowledgeable people, because that's what we all need to do. Please let me encourage you to include.
pick me, he says.
Well, it doesn't have to be me, but no, pick a constitutionalist to be there to help, because this is the problem with all the policy. We talk about it weekly on the show, is that policy is driven by what people think is necessary, and they forget that it's all illegal the way they're going about it. So you need somebody to say, whoa, you're going outside the lines, bring it back in, and let's figure out how we can do this actually lawfully. Because if we had 100 senators that were thinking along that line, we got a different country.
Yeah,
exactly. Very true.
I was just, before you get away, Reverend Lahmeyer, I wanted to hear from you a little bit about your educational background and family background, just so we get a better sense of where you're coming from.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was born here in Tulsa in the Pink Hospital, St. Francis, and then grew up. Maybe you all may know, most people never know. They ask me, where did you grow up from? I always say Claremore, but that's not actually the truth. I grew up in a little place called Tiowa, in between Claremore and Inola. I went to Justice Tiowa. The hills of Tiowa. And so then I went off to Oral Roberts University. That's where I got a bachelor's and a master's in theology. I became the crusade director for Reinhard Bonnke's ministry, Christ for All Nations. We had a big crusade in Oklahoma City. And while I was doing that, I stepped in as the Oklahoma State Director for the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association. So for the last 5 years, I've been the state director for Billy Graham's ministry here in Oklahoma, which has created an incredible ground game, because I've crossed all 77 counties, meeting with pastors and leaders, developing relationships on behalf of the Graham organization. But I'm not making cold calls into Pottawatomie County. I know people in all these different areas just because of crisscrossing. And then from there, I stepped in as the lead pastor of Sheridan Christian Center at the time. It was one of Tulsa's most historic churches. A lot of great ministries came out from Victory Christian Center, Rhema, 30 other churches. But when my wife and I, when we stepped in, the church wasn't in great shape. It had dwindled down, but God did a miracle, revitalized it. Today, we don't go by Sheridan Christian Center. We're still the same church, but we go by Sheridan Church, and we've relocated from 2nd and Sheridan to 41st and Sheridan. It's just an incredible journey. And then, like I said, my wife and I, we have 5 children from 11 all the way to 1, and we're done. 5 is a great number, and we're stopping there.
Impressive.
And where do you teach at? You said a Bible college?
I teach at Victory College. I've taught at Victory College for the last 5 years. And currently I'm teaching a course called hermeneutics, which is just a fancy word. How do you interpret the Bible?
That is excellent. You guys, anything else for our fine guest, Jackson Lahmeyer, tonight?
No, I just want to say Ted Cruz mistakenly went after Obama on the marijuana enforcement when California and Oregon and Colorado and that. And, it was Rand Paul that basically said, even though they were opponents in 2015, he said, no, this is states' rights. And Ted, who'd argued so many cases before the Supreme Court, realized he wasn't thinking out of the box, or he was too narrow in his focus, and he had to agree with Rand. Yes, this is a states' rights issue. I'm saying
it's a state issue, in my opinion.
I'm saying this as the example of, don't be afraid to think out of the box. question.
Good. I appreciate that.
And there's a lot of money in Oklahoma businesses going into the marijuana industry, and they are risking it all based on the strength of the state law versus the Fed law, because there's a giant festering blister that's going to happen right there, and everybody that is in the business right now in Oklahoma. So let's hope that when you get in there, Jackson Lahmeyer, that you side with the state's rights. I will tell you this: when I ran for mayor and they accused me of not having any experience before, what I found out in the long run was they fear my ability to appoint had I won the mayorship. They don't fear me. They fear who I will pick to run 52 different trusts and authorities. And just like you were saying, I think you have an excellent plan of asking those experts to advise you along the way. And so I think that's fantastic. Tell us again one more time for all of our listeners about Tuesday's event, where, when, times, etc., because this is a big deal with General Flynn.
Big deal. We're officially launching the campaign Tuesday, March the 16th at the Riverwalk Thrive Time with Clay Clark, and General Flynn will be there. He's endorsing me, and we're going to have an awesome time together. It's going to be at 6:30 in the evening. And to stay up to date, everyone who's watching can do something very, very simple. You just text the word Jackson, Jackson 22. So Jackson 22, which is for 2022 when we're running. So Jackson 22 to 474747. It's so simple.
Excellent.
Jackson 22 to 474747.
Jackson Lahmeyer, we're getting ready to beam you out. Anything else before you get out of here?
No, I appreciate coming on and learning from you all, and I hope to continue to come back on. You know, they always say if you're good at a church, they'll invite you back for a second time. So we'll find out how I did if you guys invite me back
we
again.
want you back. Either way, we appreciate all the time you spent with us. What do you got, Van, before we let
we put an invitation out to James Lankford, too, because we're about letting everybody have their say. Yeah.
I don't know if you saw that I officially, he has a Java thing that he does, some sort of thing. So I know he's worthy of getting online with us. And I posted to his thing and tagged you on it. So everybody knew he was invited to be here. I said that Jackson Lahmeyer will politely welcome him here. And he denied to respond. I even also sent it to his official Senate page and put all my personal information like you have to do to beg the senator. And I did because
he's going to be in for a shock. We're going to sneak up on him like a storm in the middle of the night.
I am very excited to see you run and very appreciative of your time. Jackson Lahmeyer, a hat tip to Ken Reddick for connecting everybody here. And
Absolutely.
We're going to beam you out now. Jackson Lahmeyer. There he goes.
Good night. Thank you.
Good night, Jackson. We appreciate you for being here.
Have a great night, everybody.
You too.
You have to let the cube back in.
Well, I sure will.
There you go.
Oh, very good, gentlemen. How about that? What a fantastic interview. What do you think about that?
Yeah.
Yeah, you got your mic on.
I mean, like everybody, we're going to have to make sure that we begin educating everybody on the Constitution so that they've got a solid foundation. I hope that he will surround himself with people who are constitutionally solid so that we can actually get something different.
Well, I mean, all we can do is start with the guy who says the right thing first. My only regret is that GT Bynum and I were on the same side of the issue for the teenage curfew back in '96. He was 13, and he and I. That's my only regret, is that I was on his side.
He was against it before he was for it.
Good one, Oldham.
Yeah.
Well, I really am. Actually, I'm quite impressed with our guests that we're getting here. Yeah. And John Bennett, and now Jackson Lahmeyer. Sounds like he really understands the game. He really doesn't have to have every answer. He needs to know who to pick as his advisors and who to pick. Yes, sir, Van.
I do think the way I'm seeing him structure, I was around people that were very much at the beginning of the Bridenstine campaign. I really think what I'm seeing here is a lot of that same pattern being followed that Bridenstine was successful in. But when Bridenstine did it, the odds were so stacked against him. You just have to understand the odds for someone like him are very tough. That's one point. The other point I want to say is I think we're going to see other people in this race as well. I don't think it's just going to be these two.
Really?
And, you know, just a disclaimer on here, because I am running for a state party position, and I am not taking sides on these. I will be objective. I'll say what's good. I'll say what's bad. He does have a ways to go. Oldham, I think you would agree. Some of these things, I don't think he's really got anywhere close to where he needs to be.
Well, and that's where I'm looking to Ken and others who are around him now to facilitate those discussions so that we can get him up to speed. I mean, I want this for every single candidate, not just Jackson, but every single candidate. We want to make sure that they have a good foundation. In fact, I just got good news that a candidate in Broken Arrow is willing to meet and discuss these things for up to 2 classes, going through learning the Constitution so they know what they are swearing to when they swear their oath. So I'm going to leave that names out of it at this point because I'm hearing it secondhand. So I've got to confirm some things, but this is the kind of thing that we're working on doing. And I invite everybody to get in on it. And it doesn't have to be me. It has to be the Constitution.
No, it has to be you, and they have to schedule it through constitutionalgrounds.com.
We would love that.